everybody's traveling, and we all end up kind of getting into a whole turbulence of dates and schedule and time. And of course, New York being New York, and the city itself as a kind of maelstrom of its own hecticness, synchronizing everybody's schedules proved to be an art form in its own right. So thanks to Jeff for putting this together. All the proceeds of tonight are going to be going to support the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. And I have to admit, I'm a huge comic book fan, but I've never really thought of the implications of it outside of the realm of kind of expressive, just something that kids would be into. But in the last maybe 10 years or so, we've seen so many amazing evolutions. And I have to admit, I go to Japan usually to find manga and other kinds of forms. And so my relationship to American and European comics is usually a little bit more, slightly off the curve. So what I want to do today is unpack some of the issues of my new book and just kind of walk you guys through a little bit of the mythology of why there's a kind of a connection between what I'm doing and what Cory's doing and this idea of the comic book. So when we think of comics, we obviously don't necessarily, America and Europe being what they are, we're always fascinated with this idea of amnesia. So what I want to do is just pull up a couple histories of alternative iconography, and if you look at even the funny thing with these Ethiopian comics from almost 1,000 years ago, you can easily see the quarter page kind of scenario, the linear narrative. And this is Africa, a couple of thousand years ago. So 1450, we have an icon that opens and has different pages, and these are bound with leather tongs. You can see the little leather here. The different pages and the different kind of breakup of the page. Now this was a religious text, and it was meant to be something that was for the Coptic Christian faith. And it was also something that people had to memorize the various stories and be able to invoke them with sort of liturgical chants and so on. Now if you look at Hebrew culture, if you look at Europe and so on, everybody had this kind of textuality. But comic books usually would be something that was reductionist and allowed people to really get a lot of sort of visual soundbite in a proto kind of literate way. So when they talked to me about joining this effort here for the comic book convention, what I wanted to do was kind of start with my version of things, which is multimedia. And behind me you have a very famous image. It's of Eddie and Jules Murray from 1915. And it's one of my favorite kind of popularizers of this idea of stop motion photography. So it breaks apart motion. Now, in 1915, Scientific American, obviously, as it is today, was something that was a forum for thinking about ideas, but photography was still very new. So this idea of stop motion photography, for me at least, is a popularization of the idea of sampling. It's something that plays with fragments, creates sequences, and also gives you a sense of narrative momentum. I'm a huge fan of photography, but what I want to do is take you back a little bit further. I'm going to do this very condensed because I know we're on a tight schedule.